do these elliptical workout sessions while listening to this online course. It's dope. I'm digging that
Nice.
so much. I had another session today. It felt very enlightening, very cleansing. I'm there 30 minutes into it. I'm like breaking a sweat. And while I'm sweating, eyes closed, he's doing these meditations that I'm sure he didn't envision people on an elliptical sweating profusely doing, but it kind of works for me.
Yeah.
And things are happening. I'm learning new things. I'm experiencing new things. I'm digging it.
Dope.
And I had last time I did the ellipticals, he was doing like a session where and maybe I'll send you the audiobook because I don't know, maybe it just works for me right now, but give it a listen. Maybe
For that course that you're listening to?
yeah, it's not like it's an audiobook,
Yeah.
but when you listen to it, it's clearly a course and not a book.
Uh-huh.
Right? It's
Yeah.
like just one
Dope.
exercise after the other. But for me, so far, they've been more or less easy to follow along, and I've gotten interesting little insights out of them. I'll share the audiobook with you. But last time that I listened to it, I did a bunch of sessions, and then towards the end, he started a new exercise, and he asked, well, for this one, let's look at a conflict you had recently where you had a difficult time deciding what to do or whatever. And I remember I stopped it and thought, all right, I've done enough. I'll listen to this another time. But I also, for maybe a lingering moment, was considering what's something that's a current conflict. And now it seems so obvious to me, but yesterday it was kind of not that easy to answer. So I thought, oh, interesting. Well, I'll attack this again tomorrow. And then today he said, just pick a conflict, either now, something that pops up later. And then what popped to my mind was the more obvious conflicts that I have around the concept of like love and relationships. And I thought, all right, although I don't quite feel like this is maybe something, this is something I have, I think, cultivated as an approach. It's been serving me really well, which is when something comes to mind, especially in these kind of more meditative practices or more what I would call digging in the subconscious, right? When you throw questions into the abyss of your mind, when things are thrown back at me and I catch them, there's always an impulse to debate and throw back in and go, no, something else. Just wait with your hands. This isn't good. You throw the apple back and you're like, I'm looking for another fruit.
Yeah.
But oftentimes, I catch myself and I think, well, if this popped up, maybe we should take a look at this, independently if it's good or bad. Or if I think, there should be a better thing, a better conflict. I've already resolved so much about this, or I've already thought about it so much. Today I don't feel like it's a problem anymore. But it came to me, right? When I thought about conflict, the topic of relationship and love was thrown out of the abyss into my hands. And so maybe there's something to see here, something to experience, something to learn. So I stayed with it, not fully excited, but sort of submitting to it and going, well, let's explore, let's see. And he starts off asking these questions about if you had to notice one part of you that maybe is involved in this conflict, just see what comes up, see if there is a feeling, a particular sensation, or a name, see what bubbles up. And instantly I had this, what I would call now the dedicated part, which is sort of a part of me that says, you just have to pick somebody and then work really hard at it and stay dedicated. The way to think about love and relationship is not finding it, it's not being inspired by it, it's creating it with hard work and dedication, right? Building a life together, nobody's ever going to be perfect. There's no movie like romance. So the way an adult deals with this is you pick a good person, you pick somebody that has some really important must-haves and maybe some nice-to-haves, then you accept their weaknesses and you dedicate your life and you commit fully to it, not holding back. No matter how difficult things will be, ups and downs, whatever the fuck, you are a man and you dedicate yourself and commit yourself to that relation. That's how you create love. Simple. Was that correct?
Okay.
I love your laughter. But that's one part of me, right? Then
Yeah,
he
yeah,
goes
yeah.
on and says, well, now that we've discovered that part, put it on the seed and think about maybe where a conflict could be coming up. What is an opposing force within you to that part? Try to see if a thought comes up, an image, a sensation, an emotion, a memory, something comes up. Just listen inside for that. And instantly, I feel this other part of me, let's call it the freedom seeker part of me. And that fucker is not, the first one is sort of like sitting very straight or standing very straight, like how you would imagine something that's very dedicated, very stoic.
Yeah.
And this part is leaning back on a chair, feet on the desk, hands behind the head, and has
Uh-huh.
an arrogant smirk and is sort of like, fuck all this shit. Love relationship is for dumb people. It's for little children and little princesses that want to believe in some prince. All this humans, are not reliable. Humans are up or down, are selfish. Just fucking be free. Freedom is the only thing that matters. Fuck love. Freedom trumps love. Just live your life. Treat yourself. Be in a love affair with yourself. Travel the world. Just do whatever you want and make sure you're never chained to anything or anyone. Because you can't trust these people. Even if you find the most amazing person today, they will disappoint you tomorrow. In 5 years, in 10 years, will anyone be growing as fast as you? No, they won't. Eventually, you're going to be dragging them behind you. They're going to be slowing you down. They're going to disappoint you. And then you're going to have to diminish yourself to match them and make them comfortable versus them pushing you up and making you better. This love thing, it's not real, right? Love, sure, but like a relationship with one person forever or a very, very long time, rest of your life, that's bullshit. I thought, okay, these two parts, they seem to be in obvious conflict. That makes kind of sense. And then he says, just for a moment, maybe we can put one of those two into a waiting room so we can just get to know one part without any interruption, without any conflict, without anything, right? So one part can just go and chill in a waiting room while we get to know one part, and we can tell the part we're sending to the waiting room that we promise it'll come back, and then the other part will be in the waiting room, and we'll dedicate all our attention to getting to know it better. And while I was trying to do that, and I was following along, and all this made perfect sense to me, a third part popped up, sort of a third image that I didn't invite.
I'm glad to hear that.
Well,
I don't like your first and second part.
well, and the third image that popped up was, let's call it the lover. And there was a part that didn't feel like any of the other two, but it seemed to be heavily engaged in the conflict. So I was like, oh, I have a 3-part conflict here, not a 2-part conflict. And that was the part of me that just wanted to completely dissolve in love, like completely experience love. And I know that that's there's a part of me that's very sweet and very tender and wants to surrender into love, right? And wants to love fully and heavy-handedly. And so as I was feeling the presence of that part, I was like, ooh, all right, so we have the dedicated part, the lover part, and the freedom-seeking part. And then I started going through with this exercise of, how do these parts relate to each other and think about each other? What are the belief systems of these parts and how do they interact with each other? And I didn't solve the question of love and relationship. I didn't solve anything, but a great many things made a lot more sense to me. And I was thinking, aha, this is complicated. This is a complicated group, and it creates, complicating circumstances for me, and very confusing at times and very conflicting changes in perception, reality, emotions. And I really go through wild tornado rides when I enter the sphere of even thinking or considering or experiencing relationship and love. And it feels Still, but for sure, up until today's session, it always feels that it's very hard for me to sustain any level of full presence. Like I have enough presence at times that I could think of, wow, I seem to be terrified right now, wanting to run away, or I seem to be forcing myself to do certain things to be good to this other person. So I'm catching that and the feelings, but what I hadn't had a framework for is to unblend, which you would call in internal family systems unblending, which is the separation of that part and the feelings and the thoughts and yourself to be able to really observe it and experience it versus being it or being immersed or overwhelmed or occupied by it. And so I would have enough self to experience, oh, right now my mood has shifted radically without anything external happening. And now, where in one moment I was in delightful bliss, now I'm in intense terror. And what the fuck? What happened? Nothing happened. Why is my mood changing? Why is my inner dialogue changing? And then maybe I would get to the point of trying to say, let's calm down. These are just feelings. Let's not fully trust them. And let's ask, what can I do to feel better? Like that's as far as I've gotten in the past. And now I wonder within the IFS framework, because I've experienced this in some other situations where I've been better at asking questions in a way that helped me unblend. And then it was much easier for me to fully understand, observe, and then resolve situations within me. And so I'm curious to see how, if at all, this is going to help when I'm in these situations. But it was at least very interesting. It's kind of very refreshing going to something like this. And the first part and the second, I had not thought about it that way, but it was not that surprising, right? I'm like, oh, a very dedicated voice in my head. I'm like, yeah, I get that. I know that. Then, ooh, freedom-seeking voice. The thing that was interesting and I hadn't considered before was that the freedom-seeking voice was very arrogant. It was like a little shit. Like it was also clearly much younger. It was more kind of like an 18-year-old part of me. And that part was so cynical about people that he thought he had figured out people and people didn't deserve certain things. And so you should be selfish, right? And fuck all this. People love you because you provide all this value, because you're so successful, you're this, you're that. So people are impressed by you, people are charmed by your charisma, people admire. But, and then they think they're in love, but all this is just theater for small people. You're better than this. Just don't change yourself to anybody. And that was interesting. I knew there was a part of me that just wanted freedom, but I never looked at that part and thought, ooh, there's a real arrogance to it. And there's also a real immaturity to it. Like I had not known that, let's say. But then it was delightful in some way to have this third thing pop up, although it didn't fit into the framework or anything that he was saying in the audio course, right? He was like, he focused on two parts and then we put one outside and now we'll talk to one. But while we were about to talk to one, this other presence popped up and forced itself in front of the one. And that,
it's like, hello?
Yeah. And that, the delightful thing about that is that it feels both surprising and so authentic, like a real, it's like a real discovery of sorts, where everything that he guided me through, although there were insights there that were new or distinct, I was being guided, right? So I don't know, it just felt like he's taking me by hand and I'm just following his path. But this thing happened because in my mind, that part popped up and was like, wait a second, there's me as well. Let's make sure that I'm involved in this intervention here. And something about that was just awesome. Like, I don't know, I'm delighted when I'm surprised by my mind, right? So that was just something that seemed out of script.
Even me, I was so happy once that dude entered the room.
It's so interesting. You're like, Jesus Christ, these two parts suck. I hope he has another part that is not terrible. Yeah, but the funny enough, when I thought about how these three related to each other, the lover part didn't relate at all to the other two parts. The lover part was sort of not having any judgments about the other two parts, but more in a I'm very desperate and a bit malnourished. And so it was just waiting to whenever I'll get it, almost like whenever I get an opportunity, I will love as hard as I can until somebody takes away the reins again. You know what I mean? And when I would ask, what is your opinion of these parts? It was just sort of like, I don't know. I'm just waiting here for the next opening to love. And everything else doesn't really matter to me that much. While the freedom seeking part was incredibly arrogant and judgmental towards the other two parts. Both the dedicated one, which he thought was stupid and misguided, and the lover part, which he thought was also stupid and misguided. And the dedicated part was judgmental towards the other twos as well, not with as much arrogance, with a bit more maturity, but still thinking, the lover part, that's nice, but that's not what it really takes. It's all about dedication and committing yourself. That's really it, not the love thing. And the freedom one is just a little shit that knows nothing. So it was also kind of dismissing the other two parts. It was just interesting to observe that dynamic within me and within these parts and images in a way that seemed not thought. You know what I mean? It didn't seem like I was thinking.
Yeah, it's almost more like discovered.
Yes, it was
There's
more
something you found within yourself that was already there.
I was observing rather than thinking, and there's a difference. And sometimes they're hard to distinguish.
Yeah,
and you can do one while thinking you're doing the other, but there's a part of me that then still knows right now I'm not quite full. Yeah. And I had this many times doing IFS. Honestly, Ramin, many times I've gone to places where I asked an open question and I couldn't get an answer or hear it. And then my mind would go into constructing answers as options. Is it maybe this? Is it maybe that?
I get it.
And then I would have to stop myself and go, well, maybe this is as far as we can go today. I go, maybe this is as far as this part is trusting me, but I don't want to come up with the most plausible answer. In my mind, I want to hear it. I want to uncover it. And so you have to be quite, and I had to be quite, still have to be quite diligent. You have to be kind of on the lookout for that, because it's an easy thing for your mind and you to do while pretending it's doing something else. Like you're playing discovery while your mind is feeding you the best quote unquote answer. And so it was just nice and delightful to have a session like this where some surprising things happened and some dynamics played out where I was just more or less observing, and there was very little thinking involved from my side. And then I was very refreshed by the whole thing, thinking, ooh, this was some important, interesting insights. I want to get to know all these parts better. I want to pay more attention to them, and let's see what unfolds. Let's see if I can get within myself to a place that is less, where there's just less conflict, where we can get the parts to collaborate and can get myself to lead versus me getting lost and blended within those parts and confused by the wild swings of feelings and thoughts that I'm going through when, by all accounts, nothing is happening in the outside world. Right? I'm just I'm just sitting here and nothing has happened within the last 3 seconds, but my mood went from deeply in love to in panic or completely cynical. And I'm like, where is all, like, I always felt a couple of steps behind, confused about where we're going, just like, where are my feelings going and why? I can't quite catch it. And so I was excited today in the session where I thought, all right, some of this makes sense and I'll be mindful and I'll pay more attention and let's see what we can figure out. And let's see if we can resolve some of this polarization and some of this conflict and see if I can get to smoother waters inside. Yeah.
Can you tell me more about the lover?
That was the part that I had the least specific image. Like the dedicated part and the free-seeking part that were more outlined for me, whereas the lover, I was experiencing more as not as a person or personality, but almost just like as an energy, like a deep red energy, and just like it had less form, less distinction. Also, when I was asking it about the other parts, I couldn't get much from it yet. And I wonder if that's just a less familiar part to me. So it might take some time to get to know, maybe because there's maybe, less trust in that relationship. So it might take a bit more time for that part to open itself up. But I had lesser information, less details. It was much more broad in my perception. And I've had this, remember we had talked about my inner critic and the clenching of the teeth and the tense jaw, and how I've been trying to, anytime I would ask questions to some other parts in some of these sessions, I would get good answers, but then when I would ask that part questions, I would get nothing. And there was a sort of a feeling of, I'm not talking to you. Once I got something and that translated to a none of your fucking business, right? So, and I went through many sessions in very small steps, feeling a distrust. And then later there was one of these elliptical sessions that I did where for the first time I had a bigger aha moment where I felt, where that part told me that it felt that I was incredibly arrogant towards it. Did we talk about this? I think that we talked about this, right? And that I have not been listening to it and dismissing it. And my stance is basically, I know everything my inner critic has to tell me, and it doesn't matter. It's either not important, or I already know it, or it's too critical, or it's not helpful. And I would have never guessed in a million years the thought process of my inner critic thinks I'm too arrogant towards it.
Yeah.
It's not something I would have naturally thought. Very surprising. But once I thought it, once it came to me, it was so obvious to me. It was like, of course, because it is actually true. I do not care for my inner critic's points because I feel like I know this shit. I know, I didn't do everything humanly possible today. I know that I could do so much more. I know if I was a perfect human, I could have worked harder here and harder there and done this and done that. I know all this, but how's this helping me? This isn't helping. And today, I had another session with my inner critic, and I really didn't want this online course, I'm not sure. I think it's really meant that you do one exercise after another, but maybe not in like a 3 sessions at a time cadence, maybe in a 3 sessions at a time. I don't know. I'm on an elliptical. As long as I'm running, I'm listening. As long as I'm listening, I'm doing the exercises, right? I'm just not stopping. And so he brought up like, let's find a part, let's work with a part a little bit that's maybe negative, maybe something you're afraid of or something you have conflict with. And intuitively, I actually wanted to go to a vulnerable part of me. And he said distinctly, don't go to something maybe vulnerable. Let's go to a managing part, yada, yada, yada. And then I was like, I don't know. My intuition was to go to something maybe what he would call an exile, something that is very burdened and maybe put away. And I know that I think Richard Schwartz is a bit more critical of people doing self-therapy with their vulnerable parts. I think that he thinks that that can be tricky or dangerous. So he's like, let's go to a manager part. And then I thought, all right, whatever. It's like, and if you have difficulty picking one right now, just lots of people go to their inner critic. Let's just start there. And I'm like, all right, let's do another session with the inner critic. But I felt like I've done a lot with that part of me. So it's not necessarily the first pick. But then once the exercises started, I've asked that inner critic a number of times by now, hey, if you could do any other job, what would it be? And I'll tell you something. You've seen another picture of me of how beat up I look in the morning. And we've talked about this, I think, many times before, how for the past 2 years for sure, I've had this challenge of I sleep enough hours. I do all the recommended things you should do to sleep well. I tracked my sleep and my quality of sleep is very high. It has all the markers that you would want. But when I wake up, I feel beat up. I don't feel refreshed. And my face looks like it had been beat up and in turmoil. And I've been trying to figure this out for a long time. And, for a while I was like, maybe this is all the inner conflict. Maybe this, now feeling all the emotions. I don't know. Maybe I feel my inner anger at night when I'm not fully conscious. And I don't know. I went through many different theories. None of them and none of the things I did had any significant impact on the way I feel when I wake up in the morning. Recently, for the past 2 or 3 days, I did something quite unexpected in the morning. Usually I wake up, my mind is actually playing pop songs, right? It's actually like in this let's go, let's go, let's go mood. But my face is so tense and so tired and exhausted. My body feels so tense and tired that I walk out and I barely can open my eyes. It doesn't matter if I slept 6 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours. I wake up and I'm always like, exhausted. And it takes so much time to get me going that in that time, sometimes if I don't pay attention, I might let that physical sensation get me into just a bad mood where I just don't want to do anything, right? And then maybe make some bad choices. Maybe I'll choose to eat food that's not as healthy because I just feel so terrible and I just would want to feel better. Or maybe I'll, be on social media a bit longer than I should be instead of starting my writing exercise. You know what I mean? Like I'm just doing these things because I don't feel good. And for the past 3 days in the morning, I got out of bed, and then I walked into another room that has another bedroom. And I sat in that bed and I thought, well, who is the part that is my body right now? Like this exhaustion, this beat up, which part of me is that? Instead of thinking of that as me, I thought of it as what they call in IFS maybe a trailhead, right? A sensation, a thing, a phenomena that if you follow it might bring you to a really important place. And I was maybe this morning's being exhausted. Maybe it's not myself waking up after maybe a tumultuous nights of different parts fighting or whatever. Maybe this is a part. And then I sat there and it was just trying to feel what that part feels and what I can learn. The first 2 mornings where I did this, I didn't really go or get very far. There was no unique insight or anything like that. But I did feel better. Not in some 360, everything is gray and now it's rainbow colors, but it was dark gray and we, lifted it up a number of shades, right, in the color scheme. Just it got light gray from dark gray. And I was like, I feel a little lighter, a little less burdened. I don't know what it is, but this already felt good. So I'll follow this further. And today, for the first time, I had a thought that came up to my mind. What if this is my inner critic? What if this, because it did feel like I felt exhausted, and I felt my inner critic is exhausted. It felt so tense, and I was like, my inner critic is so tense. It has all these things to say, and I've shut it up. Because my inner critic for the past 2 years has not been a voice that's talking all day long. I don't have a lot of critical inner dialogues. And when I have a sensation of, you should be doing more, why am you, I always shut it up. I always go, shush, I know, but right now I'm doing different work. Or right now, this is the best I can do. So there's no verbal presence of it. So I think it has migrated to a physical sense, which is this tension in the jaw. But I also felt this morning that, well, because I've been in relationships in the past where for a long time I was hypercritical and couldn't talk to these people. And it's very draining, right? It's very I would carry all this tension, all these things I wanted to say and all this aggression, and just I would have to hold it in. It's very, very exhausting. And that I felt in the mornings, oftentimes I feel like I want to give up on the day. And then I felt my inner critic it's almost at this point of like, I just want to give up on everything, like on this relationship, on everything, because I cannot speak. I cannot keep it in. I don't know where to go with it. I'm not successful. Like, I'm not useful, right? I'm not using my inner critic anymore at all. And I was just wondering, what if this is how my inner critic feels? And the only time I allow it is, maybe towards in my sleep or towards the last hours of my sleep. So when I wake up, I'm blended with my critic and I just feel like shit. And, I don't know. It didn't come to me with some definitive, yes, here's a stamp of truth. Yeah. It just was there as a thought. And I was, all right. And my mind was just thinking, let's continue to follow this train of thought. Let's keep doing this. There's something interesting when in the morning I sit down and instead of trying to get out of this state, or I feel a little complaining about this state. Why do I always feel I did everything so well last night? Why am I waking up like this? Which is one dialogue that I sometimes have. Or this, okay, what do I have to do to get out of this? I don't like how I feel. Let's get out of this. Instead of doing any of these two things, how about I just sit and just visit that feeling? Who is this that is so destroyed and exhausted? Who is this? What does this want? And then today, when I was on the elliptical, I've already done the love conflict session, and this inner critic part comes up, or practice, or whatever you want to call it. I asked my inner critic again, because he said, ask that part. What would it rather want to do than, whatever it's doing right now, if it could do anything? And for the first time, I got sort of a timid answer. And it was saying, well, my mind went to, do you want to be the encourager? Do you want to just be the one that's encouraging me? And it was like, fuck no, I don't want to have that role. And then the answer that came was, if I didn't have to be afraid of the consequences of you not having an inner critic and the things that I'm trying to prevent from happening, if that truly was a thing that could be done, like the worst consequence that I'm trying to protect you from is a consequence that doesn't exist anymore, if that's true. And up until this moment, that part of me was not willing to entertain that question. So it was for the first time thinking, okay, I'm not saying that I believe it, but if it was possible that what I'm trying to protect you from is not a valid threat anymore, and I could do anything else, I would want to be your challenger, like the part of you that challenges you to do uncomfortable things that will make you better, not criticize you so you don't fuck up, but challenge you so you get better in ways that, like, in a way that is nudging but not hammering. You know what I mean? Like, just because right now, like the critic part is just hammering the same. It's just ringing the same bell, hammering the same nail. It's very obsessive. Yeah. But this would be more if I didn't have to have all these fucking panics and fears. These threats I'm trying to save us from wouldn't exist. Then I would just sit there and I would, challenge you when everything else inside of you just wants to make you happy, right? I'd be like, hey, I think we could do more here. Up for the challenge? What if you did this? Let's go. And I would like bring up challenges rather than anything else. And then I thought, okay, that sounds fair enough. That sounds like a good thing. That sounds like a authentic part of myself. And then there was like, for a little second, there was a dialogue that was going on where the inner critic basically said, without using these words, but it was mainly the message of like, listen, motherfucker, you have paid attention to so many fucking parts of you, right? All the feelings are important now, all of them, right? Like exploring love and tenderness and sadness and grief, and feeling the diaries, and you've been more resting and more loving and more less is more and not pushing yourself. well, it's great, but I have been ignored. Like, my voice, anything I have to say is being shoved to the side and has nothing of legitimacy anymore. So I don't believe for a second that if I changed what I did, like, you would pay attention to it. And I thought, all right, what would be a first challenge? Let's just try something. Let's just do a challenge. What will be a first challenge? And then it was obvious. We've talked about this for a long time now. I've had the desire to write more. And recently, I've had the frustration of not really making progress on writing a lot more lately, right?
Yeah.
And so instantly the thought came to mind, well, do 30 minutes of writing for 30 days. No exceptions. No, today I'm gentle to myself and I'm not doing it. It's just 30 minutes, just every day. And there was a little fear of mine that I was like, 30 minutes is, we could start slower. We could just do 15 minutes, right? 30 minutes. And it was like, you little bitch, it's 30 minutes, not 3 hours. 30 minutes. You want to tell me you cannot do 30 minutes in a 24-hour day? Are you this busy? And the truth is no. It's like, so 30 minutes, just say yes or fuck off. And I was like, all right, let's try it. And today I did 30 minutes of writing, which is the most writing I've done in a long time, I think, in a while. And besides, the one surprising thing is that it was very easy. The other thing was that it was very creative. Like, I like the writing I did. It's not something to publish, but I liked doing it. It was very natural.
It gave you joy.
And there was something satisfying in me that was thinking, okay, I've done many challenges before in my life, but it felt like I'm doing it for a different reason, which was it felt satisfying. I don't know. So let's see. But I do have the impression that as I'm discovering this inner critic part, and as in the beginning, that part, the relationship seemed not good at all, and there seemed to be very little trust. I wasn't making significant progress. Like, anytime I interacted with it in the early days, it was still significant progress because I was learning, wow, that part doesn't want to talk, right? Wow, that part is very closed off. Oh, there's no trust. Well, what could be the reason why that part isn't trusting me, right? And as I kept visiting that part of me, and as I keep an open mind, and as I keep an honest effort and a curiosity, today felt like the first time after I've done, 10 different sessions in various forms and exercises of like trying to visit my inner critic or get to know it better. Today was the first time where I felt that it was opening up a little bit and giving me something, right? Trusting me a bit. And that felt really good. And that was also a reconfirmation. It was funny to me that when he was suggesting to go to the inner critic, I thought, I'd rather discover something new. I've done so much with it. Maybe let me do something else. But then as I had the patience to go and visit that part again, something very satisfying happened. And I thought, bringing this patient to that part of me every day is what's needed to repair the relationship and maybe get to a really good place together. Because I know it's been one of the biggest things that has been bothering me in my emotional inner world over the past 2 years has been this tension I can't shake off. And that eventually manifested itself in this jaw tension that is, that is hounding me in these mornings that I'm like, so drowned and drained by. And I don't know, maybe I'll follow down this trailhead and I'll arrive somewhere really beautiful that doesn't resolve all these issues, right? Because there's other parts that I'm not aware of. Who knows? But it's such a beautiful metaphor for life, because this inner relationship building, this inner relationship repairing follows a very universal melody and pattern, right? The leadership you have to present the patience, the openness, when there's not trust, when there's polarized parts, when there's conflict within a system, it generates so much tension and pain and conflict. And it's so difficult for each part individually to understand why things are happening the way they're happening and how to resolve them, because every single part is looking at itself and maybe a few others, but is missing the bigger picture and maybe doesn't have the position to really resolve. And so bringing that kind of tenderness and patience and openness within yourself, within the parts of yourself that you might be in conflict with, that you don't like, that you want to avoid, that you want to change, has a beautiful quality to it. And sometimes it's difficult. Today, it was just very gratifying.